Happy New Year. Good to be back in the saddle again. We're going to have our friends in the State House and the People's House tomorrow. Looking forward to that so that we can start to go over all of our legislative and our administrative priorities for 2022. We've got a lot of momentum. We want to make sure we're doing everything we can to keep that momentum going forward. This is our annual agenda rollout, or our blueprints to build one Indiana. Now our sixth, and it should be of no one's surprise if you're a Hoosier, that they're focused on 5 different pillars, which are our priorities. Those being economic development, workforce development, our health and wellness development, our public health, obviously our community development, which we'll get into in depth here in a little bit, and then providing good government services for every citizen of Indiana and all of our guests. So we'll take them one by one on those 5 fronts, and then we'd both be able to answer any questions that you might have. Keep in mind that while we are on the eve of a short session, our priorities and our agenda is not short. It is long and it is substantial when you consider all the administrative priorities that we have either underway or will soon be launching over the course of this next year. So we'll start with the first one. We'll burn right through these. We've got a number of people. I see Dr. Box, I see Dr. Jenner, I see Dr. Rosiniak. I'll call you Dr. Crouch here in a second if I'm not careful. But we got a number of people who can also go in depth into these different agency priorities as we work through them. First, on the economic front, economic development, obviously we're coming off a very strong year in 2021 in terms of our state's economy. Just over at the IEDC, we ushered in a new all-time record in terms of our capital investment, in terms of new payroll, in terms of the number of new job commitments. Those brought in wages, average wages of over $28 an hour. That's the second all-time high. We also saw new headquarters either starting up here in the state of Indiana or relocating to the state of Indiana. We increased our FDI and our GDP, our FDI being our foreign direct investment, and our GDP. That, in turn, is the reason why we saw such high revenue streams and reserves. That's going to obviously enable us and trigger our ATR, our automatic taxpayer refund, that will go into effect later this spring by May 1, which we'll be sending back $545 million dollars back to 4.3 million Hoosiers. That's a little over 910,000 Hoosiers that will be in receipt of a taxpayer refund. So that's catching all those people this time. Unlike the last time this was kicked in, it's catching all those people who have an income tax liability, folks who filed but don't have an income tax liability. We're going to also be looking at other ways to keep this momentum going up on the economic front in a number of ways. We'll be working with Travis Holden to make sure we get that ATR across the finish line, but then we're also working with Doc Brown, Representative Tim Brown, to make sure that we remain the #1 manufacturing state in America per capita. We're #1, and as we continue to advance on the manufacturing front, we have to make sure that we're keeping up and keeping pace with all of the new equipment that's being purchased. And so we're proposing eliminating the 30% business personal property tax floor on new equipment to encourage those continued investments in the state of Indiana and to continue to build out that very important sector to our state's economy. When Secretary Chambers signed on board, it's been about a half a year now, I first asked him to look under the hood and make sure that our toolkit, that our economic development toolbox was keeping up as well. And modernized, and he did exactly that. Obviously, the toolkit that we've been using has been in place for about 20 years. It served us well. I just talked about the records that we were breaking. But in the ever-changing landscape out there and the deals that we're competing on, we need to make sure that we're nimble and that we're changing along with the times. And so we'll be seeking advancement on a few areas. One, greater flexibility that's already with the tools that we already have, and I'm referencing primarily our tax credits, different tax credits. We want to look at those collectively, not just individually when we're going out and trying to recruit a business to set up shop here and grow here in the state of Indiana. We also are going to be looking at creating a funding mechanism to capture the long-term benefit that we see with big projects that are looking for new homes and pull that up front in the near term. So we'll still have those performance metrics in place, but we're looking at what is the true ROI to the state of Indiana over the long term, and how can we pull up some of those incentives or those investments from the state perspective up front when we're doing the deal. And then lastly, and we'll be working with Senator Mishler on both of those, and Senator Mishler on stepping up a remote worker program. We've learned anything. We've talked about this a lot. Folks can work anywhere if we've learned anything through this pandemic. And we want to make sure that we're not losing any potential talent around the world if they want to log in anywhere, but they want to live here. We want to make sure that we're competing on that field, and so we'll set up a program that will have an end date of fiscal year 23, the end of fiscal year 23, but we don't know what we don't know right now, and so we're going to cast a wide net out there and be a very attractive place for remote workers to come call Indiana home. Second front, or second pillar, has everything to do with, I always talk about people, and how we're skilling up our number one asset. This is a lifelong pathway. This is pre-K to graduating from high school on to adult learning and adult training, skilling up for those jobs that are out there right now. We need to fill them. And so Dr. Jenner is here. We'll be looking at ways of strengthening up our kindergarten readiness. And we'll be working with Representative Bob Baining on that front as well, making sure that the Office of Kindergarten Readiness inside the DOE is working with FSSA to make sure that our kiddos are ready for that next step and the next step after that. We'll also be, in Dr. Jenner's world, launching the Indiana GPS, or the Graduates Prepared to Succeed dashboard. This is something that's going to be very beneficial to community leaders, educators, everyone that's concerned about how a school and the students are performing as they are graduating. And I'm looking very forward to this. Has everything to do with, civic and digital literacy, communication skills, collaboration skills, your academic mastery, of course, but when companies are looking at school corporations and individual schools, this is all part of that new transition to that accountability that we've been talking about and working on now for months and months and months. That will be launched, Katie, that'll be this fall, 2022-2023 school year that will launch that Indiana GPS. We'll also be working on developing a teacher supply and demand marketplace. We want to make sure that we're getting those high demand, think STEM, think special needs. We want to make sure we're filling those vacancies that are currently out there with teachers who are looking for that employment. And so we'll be building this and are building this marketplace that connects those educators to those places of employment. And then lastly on this front, same theme about connecting Hoosiers to opportunities. We'll be working on connecting unemployed Hoosiers with employers and jobs and the training necessary. So this is a very proactive approach to those. We've got a 3% unemployment rate here in the state of Indiana, lower than any state that we touch. That's 100,096 individuals. We've got 152,000 unfilled jobs posted on our state website. How do we match those? And so we'll proactively be reaching out to those 100,000 plus and getting them in touch. If they're a veteran, getting them in touch with Veteran Services. If they're unemployed and they don't have a high school diploma, we're getting them attached to the services that they need. If they're a high school graduate with a diploma, getting them attached to those training services that they need, and getting folks who are ready and able to work right now, sending them information on jobs that are available close to them right now and that they qualify for. On the third front, this has got everything to do with what we spent the better part of 2 years talking about, and very intensely over the last 6 months as the Governor's Public Health Commission has been getting around on a statewide tour. But we'll be working on a number of items in addition to that as that information is gathered, and we'll be ready for a 2023 budget session. But we're also going to be working with Dr. Barrett, Representative Brad Barrett, to make sure that we're strengthening the guidelines for childhood-led screening. We're in a bit of a hit and miss approach right now, but we want to require those health providers to offer blood-led screening for individuals who are 9 to 72 months old. So parents would be able to opt out, but we want to make sure that they at least offer that, and so that we have a true picture of what the population that may have lead contamination. We'll also be working with Representative Ed Clear on our continued efforts to reduce infant mortality by requiring a more comprehensive autopsy process for sudden unexplained infant death investigations. This is going to be good for everyone involved, obviously EMS and DCS and state police and the coroner who is conducting this, but all of them coming together and then having the facts. And Dr. Box, you could elaborate on that later if there's any questions on that. But this is going to make a difference. And it may seem like a small item, but anytime you're talking about saving one life, huge, huge difference maker. And then something I want to kick it over to you now, something we talk an awful lot about as well, and we hear about this when we're out on the road, something near and dear to your heart. We want to provide a comprehensive strategy to support Hoosiers who may be struggling with mental health issues. And so I thought maybe you would share a little bit about your work with stakeholders, your work with this new approach, and how we're going to start playing offense more so than ever.
Well, thank you, Governor. And you know, it really goes back to, I think it was the fall, November, maybe, December of 2020, when we were sitting in your office and talking about what we wanted to focus on over the next 4 years, above and beyond our normal duties and responsibilities. And I indicated for me it was mental health and addiction, that the human cost of this pandemic is huge, and it's going to exponentially grow for years to come. And not just the cost to our families, but the cost to our workforce, the cost to our budgets, whether we're in the public or the private sector. You mentioned we both travel the state a lot. And when I talk to school superintendents, teachers, Boy Scout, Girl Scout leaders, anyone that deals with young people, they will share with me that the amount of panic, anxiety, depression, suicide ideation, acting on suicide, and self-harm is greater than they've ever seen with our young people. And that is the future of Indiana. Before COVID, 1 out of 5 Hoosiers struggled with mental illness or addiction. And there's not one of us that doesn't know someone that faces these challenges, maybe our own family members. And my family's no exception. My mother suffered from depression, my sister committed suicide, my brother's an alcoholic. Those Hoosiers who inherited genes that predispose them to these conditions deserve an opportunity to succeed in life. And Governor, with your leadership and the General Assembly's support, You all have appropriated an additional $100 million for mental health. That is going to go a long way towards enabling Hoosiers to succeed. But how can we engage the private sector more? How can we bring them alongside us in our efforts to tackle this pandemic that we're facing? And so we are launching the Lieutenant Governor's Roundtable on Mental Health, to be co-chaired by John Lechleiter, the former CEO and president of Eli Lilly and Company. And the launch of the founding members of this roundtable that was launched in late 21 include the Irsay family and the Colts, the Simon family and the Pacers, Eli Lilly and Company, the Division of Mental Health and Addiction, among others. And we need all voices to come to the table if we are going to tackle this massive challenge that we have before us. The goal of the roundtable is to convene inclusive and comprehensive group of leaders tackling mental health and addiction in the private and the public sector. And, you know, we also will look at spurring innovation by supporting our private sector partners. But here's what's really important. This roundtable will come alongside government and work with government to amplify what's working and to fill in the gaps on what is needed. And to learn more, you can go to our mentalhealthroundtable.org to get information, to sign up for our newsletter, to join us in our efforts. And the early response has been powerful. Groups from large to small businesses, nonprofits, faith-based groups, they have all raised their hand to help. And we encourage those who want to support us with their philanthropy or who just want to join in our efforts to sign up and to be a part of this so that together we can make the whole bigger than the sum of the parts. And it really reminds me of a quote that Helen Keller once said. She said that alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much. And state government, with the private sector working with us, can allow Hoosiers the opportunity, all Hoosiers the opportunity to be successful in life.
Well, thank you for being such a good ambassador and for working with, I mentioned Dr. Rosiniak here and FSS and Jay and leading the charge. So I feel like this is one of those issues that when we compare notes, when we're connecting, something that frequently creeps into the conversation about did you know of this around the state of Indiana, and the real appetite for, as you mentioned, the private sector to come alongside and say, how do we partner with you to make a real difference? So thank you. Moving on to the fourth pillar, community development. Obviously this has to do with the very foundation, the very platform of which everything rests upon, our infrastructure and every which way that we connect with one another. We are also going to, Homeland Security is here, Steve Cox, but we're also going to collaborate with local governments. We've already sent out surveys to local entities, and we want to help them strengthen their cybersecurity efforts and to make sure that they're truly protected. You're in receipt of some of the responses back already. We'll do the analysis, we'll share that with the local entities, and then we'll have a local grant program that they can apply for to harden or to make their efforts more secure from a local perspective. We'll also, another thing that creeps into the conversations as we get out and about is there's a lot of excitement about the first round, I say first round of the READY program. The General Assembly appropriated $500 million, and the local leaders saw that and said, we can raise you another $500 million. So we're looking at this as the first phase of the READY program, but we'll be rolling those out. Local communities are right now in touch with the IEDC, going through their plans and their priorities within their overall plan. And so we've got, a year to really be hitting the ground running fast so that we can come back in 2023 and make the informed case that there is more to be done, and we have the financial wherewithal here in the state of Indiana to do just that. We're also going to be continuing to implement and to build One Indiana through our roads and bridges program, through our trails. We're in round 3 of the trails. Our applications have already been sent back in. A lot of excitement on the trail program and reaching that goal of every Hoosier living within 5 miles of trail access. But also broadband, which falls under your portfolio and responsibility as well. You want to give us an update on the round that we find ourselves in now, and speaking to the fact that we have incredible support here at the state, but we also got some federal support as well.
Absolutely. And again, thank you for your leadership. You kind of got out on the broadband expansion and investment before other leaders in other states did, and Indiana now is the leader in that area. Because back in 2019, with your leadership and the support of the General Assembly, $100 million was invested to be able to expand broadband throughout Indiana. To date, we've awarded in that Next Level Connections program $80 million, which will connect 22,000 Hoosier families and businesses. And then COVID hit in 2020. And now with students e-learning and workers teleworking and healthcare being delivered telehealth, being connected is absolutely critical. And so the General Assembly passed legislation this past session. They also appropriated an additional $250 million to expand broadband. But the legislation they passed established the Indiana Connectivity Program, which is, to my knowledge, the only one of its kind in the country that actually empowers Hoosiers to contact us through a website or a toll-free number telling us, 1, they don't have connection, or 2, they don't have adequate speed. And then that's allowing us to be able to bundle those addresses and then go out to broadband providers to provide that service. We are actually in the process of kind of bundling those addresses. We'll be going out to broadband providers. We'll be looking at that first award sometime here in April. And then the other program that the General Assembly established was the subsidy program that put a priority on health clinics, schools, and families with students. And that program will be rolled out by Okra here this year. But to your point, being connected is really about economic opportunity and quality of life. And when you talked about all those remote workers, to get them to Indiana, we have to have that connection. And that, you know, that investment, which is a record, that comes on top of the investment that the federal government is making. We know we're going to get a minimum of another $100 million for infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, and you know, we won't rest. It'll continue to be a priority of your administration that we end up investing in broadband until every Hoosier is connected to that last mile.
Love it. And expand our field. Critically important. We'll also, you talked about just the building out of that whole network. We've got a lot of building. It's going to be a busy spring. There's going to be a lot of dirt flying.
A lot of orange cones?
A lot of orange cones. Patience required. That's progress. But we've also got projects that are already appropriated, and that work is underway, whether it's design or getting the construction managers, et cetera. But when you think about all over the state of Indiana, new State Park Lodge up in Potato Creek, new correctional facility in Westville, the new deaf and blind schools, new archives building, and plus all those roads, plus all that broadband, plus all those trails, plus all the armories, the new armories, plus the new rest stops, plus the new state police post and labs.
And I-69?
And that's a big one, and how you get to and from home. Mm-hmm. So that will be done by the end of this term. And it's 3 years ahead of schedule and paid for. So thanks for that lead in. But there's so many big projects that are not just scheduled, but are being done right now all over the state of Indiana. And this is connecting us again with the world and the marketplace. The fifth and final, and then we'll open it up for any questions that you might have. The fifth and final pillar is providing good government service. This is what our agencies, I think, have done an incredible job since day one, but even over the course of the last 2 years under a lot of intense pressure and round-the-clock working. But it's hard for me to find an area where we skipped a beat, really. We just hunkered down and did double time, and we'll continue to make this a priority. And if we rank high or rank number one in some category, we're competing against ourselves now. And how do we continue to improve? Obviously, one area where we sought outside opinion on this was when we went to the third party and asked them to review our state law enforcement agencies. And specifically, I didn't mention the $70 million in upgrades at Aliyah, but we're also going to be broadening, expanding that board from 17 members to 21 members. And so we'll have more input on a statewide basis to make sure that we're operating most efficiently and with equity always in mind. And then finally, Steve Cox is here. I don't see Joe Thacker. I don't see our state fire marshal, but we'll also, I'm pretty proud of this, I think one of 4 states, Steve, you mentioned, that has formed a partnership with IDEM and our Department of Homeland Security to collect and dispose of PFAS foam, which was outlawed a couple years ago. But we will be paying for, the state of Indiana will be contracting with someone who will then collect and safely dispose of this foam. And that's ongoing right now. The bidding is out right now, and that is something that again, only 4 states in the country are making this easier for locals, and with the emphasis on firefighter safety. And we're proud to step up on that front. So obviously, I won't drone on more, but we've got a lot going on, a lot of implementation, a lot of connecting, a lot of constructing, a lot of growth and opportunity and progress. I keep reminding myself these are good problems to have, growth problems and everything that comes from them. A lot of what we're doing is not just getting the work done right now, but we're preparing for, which is now just less than 12 months, depending on how you count it, away from a budget session. And we're going to be a year removed from a couple years where the federal government has pumped in billions and billions and billions of dollars into states. And we're going to be a year away from, 6 months away from the findings for the Public Health Commission and the capital projects, and we'll know a more up-to-date rate of inflation and how that's affecting everything that we're building around the state of Indiana. Obviously, I mentioned READY, so we've got some pretty substantial price tags out there that we want to talk about in 2023 as well. And I think this year of work in the trenches going forward is going to pay dividends for the state of Indiana to make some good calls when we arrive here next January.